Inspiration, clarity, confidence, and wholehearted business strategy. Welcome to Your Next Chapter, the podcast especially for women in their 40s and beyond who know that business and personal development go hand in hand. Tune in each week for marketing, mindset, and personal growth strategies, along with inspiring stories from women around the world who are creating new businesses and lives that are personally fulfilling and financially rewarding. If you're looking to create a business and life you love, you're in great company. Let's find out what will unfold in your next chapter. I'm your host, Angela Rasmus, and I'm so delighted that you're here. Hi there, and welcome to episode 31 in the Your Next Chapter podcast. Here's the truth about life, I guess. To get to this stage, it's really unlikely that you're unscathed. There's undoubtedly been challenges and acutely painful experiences that you've gone through. Now, at the time, we all wish that it wasn't happening and would really prefer not to have these experiences. However, when we manage to move through them, come out the other side, put some space between it and us, we can often look back with what I like to call hindsight and recognize that as painful as it was, that experience has actually helped us grow, that it's been of value, that it's helped shape us into the women that we are today. And if we're really fortunate, we can sometimes turn those experiences around and use them to help others. That's often why I say that a next chapter business is built on skinned knees more often than not. It's certainly been my experience, and that's why the conversation I'm having with today's guest was particularly resonant, because it's exactly what she has experienced as well. Christine Weston's particular challenge was having to go through a painful divorce. Now, obviously, divorce is seldom fun for anybody, but with Christine, when she managed to put that space between the experience and today, she recognized that she could indeed share what she had learned. Now, what's come about is a brilliant business called the Divorce Resource, and in particular, the Split Kit. Now, you can go and find out all of the information about this on her website, but suffice to say that anyone who can turn an experience into a benefit for others is certainly worth having a conversation with, and that's why I've enjoyed it so much. Look, our conversation goes all over the place, not only looking at needing to come back from that place of self-doubt and lack of confidence and rediscover, as Christine says, the confident woman that used to live inside. When she recognized she had this breakthrough point where she knew that she could be the bridge for other people between where they are and where they want to be. Her split kit definitely saves time, it saves money, but it also saves anguish, because she herself realized that when she was in those first days after the separation and moving towards the divorce, the emotions were running ragged. And to have a resource that could help her through that would have been invaluable. It didn't exist, so she created it. She's been extremely generous as well to provide us with a download, The First Steps Through Divorce and Separation. It's the book she wrote when she realized that there was a whole lot that she could share. And you can grab a copy of that for yourself, or perhaps for a friend, by simply going to angelarasmus.com/31, that's 31, download. And a PDF copy of that book is completely free thanks to the generosity of Christine. So this conversation takes you through her journey and also those steps involved in starting a business when you don't really know what you're doing at the beginning, by Christine's own admission, and proves once again that you don't have to wait until you've got things perfect. You can follow that desire and that passion to make a difference, and you can learn as you go along. So it's a really resonant conversation. I hope you enjoy it, and let's leap in, shall we? Hello and welcome to another episode of the Your Next Chapter podcast. Thank you for spending your time here with me today. And we're having a wholehearted conversation with the lovely Christine Weston today. Christine, thank you for spending your time with us.
It's a pleasure, Angela. Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. Now, this is a conversation that I've been so looking forward to having because of the richness and the depth of the experience you have to share with us, both from a personal side with what's happened in your own life to open up a next chapter, and how that has led to a business opportunity that you possibly never even thought about in the past, but it's now opened up, and that learning curve that you've had to go on there as well. It's something that I know our listeners are really going to relate to. So I appreciate your opening your heart to have this conversation.
Well, thank you. I'm looking forward to it as well.
So let's dive in. Let's understand that the chapter that you're in now is different, obviously, to where you used to be. So could you take us through a little bit of a story as to what's brought you to this point in life?
Well, it's somewhere that I never imagined that I would be. Um, in essence, shorten the story down, and obviously it's a very long story that went on for many years. I married, I had two children, I lived in South Africa as an Australian, and the wheels fell off the marriage, and that sort of was quite early in the piece. But I stayed in the marriage for quite a long time for a number of reasons, and eventually moved to the UK. And then very soon after moving to the UK, they completely fell off. We were completely derailed. And I then went through a very nasty divorce, which lasted 4 years and spanned Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and the UK. And I had two children who were then 12 and 11, actually slightly younger, I think. And it was just a terrible, terrible time. And I ended up coming back to Australia, home to Western Australia with the boys. And that decision in itself was just the most difficult thing I've ever had to do, to try to work out where we could all live. At the time when I was going through that divorce process and that separation process, I was completely lost. I was completely flummoxed. I did not know where to start. I never ever thought that my marriage would fail. And it was really hard to find information that I needed. So that was in 2008. It's taken a long path to get to where I am now. But I've launched a business called Divorce Resource, which is an online hub for men and women going through divorce. And I intend for it to be, the first stop and the best stop for Australian men and women who are going through divorce, so they can find the answers to the questions that I just could not find at the time I needed them.
That's such a perfect example of, as you and I were talking about before we hit record, that a next chapter business is often built on on skinned knees. Yeah.
Skinned knees, sweat, tears, sort of scraped elbows, the odd bruise here and there. I was completely beaten up by it.
Yeah, and that it sounds as though, what happened there was that kernel of desire that I don't want other people to experience this. You didn't know where to start, you didn't know which direction to move in. It would have been, as I guess none of us start our marriages thinking, you know what, I really want to get divorced one day. We all
No.
start with that anticipation and that hope and that expectation that we're going to have the happily ever after, but we change, we grow. Things don't always turn out as we anticipated, but new doors open up.
They do, and I once heard an expression that if the door's not opening, it's not your door,
Yeah.
and so I just didn't know which I didn't know which way to turn, initially I couldn't actually see any doors. I had been out of work for about 15 years through choice. That was the arrangement that I had with my husband at the time. We had two small children. We lived in South Africa. He travelled extensively, and it didn't work for both of us to be out with high profile jobs. And so I stayed at home with the children. And prior to getting married, I actually had a fairly solid career in IT, which is also one of those careers where you're really working all hours. And it just didn't work for both of us to be doing that. So after 15 years, my IT skills were so, they just disappeared. I didn't have them anymore, and everything had changed in IT. It wasn't really feasible at all to go back into that industry. So faced with the prospect of, I have to earn some money now to support myself and a couple of kids, I had no idea what to do. Initially, I went back to doing that. People say, do what you know. Well, what I knew was how to move countries and how to move children into new schools and settle them into their new environment. I'd done that quite a bit in my life. And so I started work in Western Australia as a relocation consultant, helping expats to come in and relocate, get their children into school, all that sort of thing. But again, I had two kids at school, and I was out all hours of the day and night helping other people. And at that time, my children really needed me at home to sort of consolidate the what we had left of our family. And what I would, let me just clarify that when you go through a separation and divorce, your children do still have a family. It's just that their mother and father don't live together. And whilst they were still in contact with their dad, he was living in England and commuting to South Africa. And we were living in Australia. So it really was a lot of the time 24/7, just the boys and I. They didn't have that backup. We hadn't lived here. They hadn't lived here their whole life. So we were really completely starting again. And I felt that they needed me at home. So then it came to, well, what can I do to generate an income? And that's when the idea of do what you know, well, after 4 years of going through it, I felt like I'd done a degree in getting divorced. So I thought I better get a job in that line. And I thought, no, actually, I'm not going to get a job. I'm better off doing something for myself that allows me to be more flexible and, follow my own dream and really realize my own potential. So I did, and here we are.
That word, and you've just summed that up very, very quickly, but I know what a journey that must have been to actually go from that place of, oh my goodness, what next? And then, and I hear that a lot, the idea of, well, in your case of being in IT before you had the kids, and then looking at, okay, now I need to go back, right? I want and need to go back into the workforce. And yeah, the reality is for a lot of us, when we do make the choice, if we have that choice to stay with our children and to devote that time to, being a fantastic mum, but it does come at a cost when it comes to moving back into the workforce. And a lot of people don't like to have this conversation, but it's true. There is, with the way that things are set up for us, the way that our society works, we don't place that value, or society doesn't place that value when it comes to going back into the workforce on the time that we spent as caregivers. And it can put us behind the eight ball, and that's difficult, especially when we do end up in the situation where we are separated or divorced, and we have to suddenly take care of ourselves financially again. There's a real challenge there. So there's a lot of courage in going out into creating your own business. That uncertainty that was there. What sort of thoughts were coming up for you at that time?
I'm not sure if it was courage or a little bit of madness, but a lot of what was coming up for me was fear and sort of lack of self-esteem, really, not really backing myself to be able to do it. Just really sort of thinking, little old me, I'm not sure that I'll be able to do that. And I think that was a consequence. I had allowed that to happen throughout the 12 years that I was married. I had been one of those women who was in the workforce and sort of frowned upon women who stayed at home with their children, and kind of, really arrogantly figured that they didn't have much to offer apart from, what was in their children's nappy and nail polish. And it was so wrong, because when I was a mother at home with my children, I found myself, sitting next to all sorts of fabulous women who were they had so much to offer. At this point in time, they had chosen to stay at home with their children because they had that option. And what I also discovered there with those women was that the cost is to them sometimes in staying at home. So whilst perhaps going to work, and when I did go to work and my children were at home, I felt there was a cost to my children and their development and me being able to support them, particularly at that time and what we were going through. I think once things became a lot smoother, we all got a little bit more into our routine. It was far more manageable. But at that time, I felt like there was a cost to them by me not being at home at 7 o'clock at night and out with someone else helping them to settle their children. But, that cost thing, it can work the other way, where really competent women who've got a lot to offer have made the choice to stay at home, and that in the end, to some degree, costs them. And I think that's what happened with me. I didn't value really what I was doing at that point, and it was sort of like I was a solid rock, and then this little drip of doubt and this little drip of sort of me not appreciating myself more than, other people not appreciating what I was doing, just wore that rock down into what ended up to be quite a few pebbles on the ground. And it took me quite a long time to build up my confidence again and say, yes, I can do this. And the other part of it that was difficult for me to get my head around, and the fear of it, was that there's a little bit of negativity and sort of a little bit of a stigma attached to being a divorcee, and particularly, I think, a woman. So a lot of the time you'll meet people and they'll, I'll say, oh, yes, I'm divorced. And they sort of see me as a man hater, that I've set up this business called Divorce Resource. And men will often say to me, oh, you must hate men. I certainly don't. I love one in particular at the moment. And but that is a bit of a perception. And I was really concerned that I didn't want to be, Ms. Divorce Australia and people thinking I was a man hater and bitter and twisted ex-wife, because that's certainly not the case. And it took a long time for me to realise that what I had and what I had developed was really, really useful. And then the focus shifted from the negative aspect of it and perhaps the stigma to, no, hang on a second, I have got something here that is really, really helpful, and I'm going to go out there and share it with people.
That part there is so important. You've said a lot of things just as I'm reflecting back and listening to what you've just shared, which is so important for other people to hear as well. In the first instance, that cost to, we get ourselves stuck in that space, don't we, of the mother guilt that kicks in.
Yes.
If we're not there. And isn't it funny, there is no such word as father guilt in the dictionary. There's only mother guilt. But that feeling of trying to do the right thing in all areas and being stretched and not quite living up to expectations in any one area. That's certainly a conversation and opinion that I've heard from so many women. But that point that you made about the cost to ourselves, if we choose, and hopefully this is the key thing, isn't it? It's the choice, because a lot of women don't have choices in the way
that's true.
You and I are very, very fortunate, because I've had the choice as well. I chose to be home with my children when they were small before I then launched my own business. But a lot of people don't have choice, and that's sad. No. But in this conversation, with you having the choice, but even when you did, it came at a cost, and that was to your self-image, your self-worth, your self-esteem. And that's, as we were saying before, because I believe it's because there isn't that value put on raising our kids. I mean, for God's sake, we're only raising the next generation. Let's not put a value on that.
Yeah.
But I had a really interesting exercise. I work with a mindset coach. I'm a huge believer in investing in people who can and help you grow. And we had a session, this is a good 18 months ago, where I was in that place of, really, I haven't contributed to the household as much as my husband has. Financially, I was looking at, we've been married for 20 years. And she put me through this exercise of actually putting a value on, if I hired somebody to do all of the things that I had done as a mother, from being the nanny to cooking the meals to doing the shop, all the stuff, the stuff that happens, and we actually managed to generate, conservatively, I'd made a $3.5 million contribution over 20 years.
Yeah.
And I went, holy hell, that's changed my whole perspective.
Yeah, and that's very reasonable. And that's how the family court views it these days as well. The family court actually places a lot of value and a lot of worth in a stay-at-home mother who not only supports, not only cares for and supports the children and the household, but in many cases also allows the career-driven husband to pursue his career to the full extent. And that's a very generalized view, and it's sort of sounds. I'm sort of hesitating to say that, but it is still these days the general setup in most people's homes, that the father is the main breadwinner, and the mother during that time when the children are smaller is sort of supplementary to that, or stay at home.
And that's talking the truth. It's not that we're stuck in an old era or something. It was just that was the way it was. It's been more of the tradition. Things are moving and changing, and the more they do, the better. But the reality is, I think, is that at the end of the day, we're still the ones that have the children, and we do tend to have a little bit. We're treading on dangerous territory here, but we we do have a little bit more of that tie, and that's that's true of whether it's a generational thing and it will have significant change, but that's the thing that we have looked at. And that is why so many women moving into their next chapter, they may have worked, but they may not have worked full time, or they may have a business, but they may have kept it manageably small because they had the other commitments. And then when it comes to, okay, more choices are here now, your children are older, new possibilities are opening up, we get sideswiped by self-doubt.
Totally.
Who do I
Yes.
think I am? I've got this idea, but why do I think it's going to work? Look at that
Yes.
person over there. But here's the thing, you felt that, but you stepped through it anyway. So talk to me about that. How did you find yourself on one hand feeling the fear of that classic book, but doing it anyway? What helped you?
Necessity. I did not have a plan B.
Yeah.
That's basically what it boiled down to. I went through that period of a couple of years where I did not have a choice. I had to go to work, and my commercial, experience in what I knew previously was just null and void. I had to go out and do what I could do, and so I got that job. And during that time, I was thinking that there's got to be a better way. There has to be, I don't like doing what I'm doing. I love the people, though. I met really interesting people, but I don't like doing what I'm doing. I don't like being at the beck and call of other people. I don't like earning barely enough money to pay the rent, but I'm working all these hours. I'm out with clients all day, and then I'm spending time that I should be relaxing with my children, actually preparing for the following day. And I just thought, this is not how I want my life to look. And I was also really nervous and a little bit fearful that my children might not like the fact that I was perhaps profiting from something that had really torn our family apart. I was worried about how they would see it. They were much younger, but as they grew, and they've become fantastic young men these days. They've both gone off and spread their wings. But as they grew into young adults, they sort of started to see the situation in the past for how it really was, and they became very encouraging. And I think that really helped me as well, to just get over that hurdle of should I or shouldn't I do this, and should I or shouldn't I put my face to it. There was some concern for me about how they would feel about it. That also I've recognised just could have been an excuse for me not doing it for myself. But basically, the reason that I ended up getting through that fear was because I couldn't see myself being happy doing what I was doing for much longer, and I didn't have a plan B.
I love how you had the realization there as I was just writing down. I did not like being at the beck and call of others. I did not like having to spend all those extra hours. I did not like. You became very aware of what was not working for you.
Absolutely.
And rather than roll over and accept it, you decided to create a new reality for yourself. And that I'm going to bring up the word again, Madonna. That was courageous, because you didn't have to. You could have changed things in a different way, got a different job, or whatever the case may be. And there's nothing, I'm not judging that there's, people who choose a job instead of starting a business, that's, a lesser thing. But you listened to that call, and you recognized that the experiences that you'd had could help another person.
Yes, I did actually, and people kept coming to me. People, you're standing on. It's amazing. It is absolutely amazing when you separate or get divorced. The number of people who will come out of the woodwork and start telling you their stories. And I remember when it first happened, I was walking through the car park. The kids were at a little primary school in the UK, and I probably looked like I'd been hit by a bus. I'd probably been crying for about 3 days. And there were, a bit of chit chat in the car park. But after that, people realised what was happening, and they were coming out of. These were people that I thought were happily married, and they were coming out of the woodwork to tell me about their story, about how they had separated previously and gotten back together, or they had previously they'd been married before and they'd gone through a divorce and now they were happily married to someone else. Or that their partner, they were very unhappy with their partner for whatever reason, and they were just not leaving for, fear, or felt like, they couldn't at this particular time. But there were so many people who came and told me their stories at the beginning. And then I think they thought perhaps they were comforting me, but it was actually terrifying the pants off me. And then as time went on, and I was living in Australia, and I think people saw me, and they said that they saw me generally as a very happy divorced woman. And a lot of people who then sort of started to embark on that process themselves came to me and said, what did you do, and how did it work, and how did you get to where you are now? What should I do? And I found myself giving people advice for nothing anyway. So I thought, well, I have got this information and I can help them. And someone said to me, we should write a book about it. So I thought, well, yeah, well, maybe I should. I could then just give them the book instead of having endless chats over cups of coffee.
I think that shows very much that there's a hunger for connection, there's a hunger for empathy, there's a hunger for commonality, and that shared experience, that it creates that connection between people. And I, as we talked about before, the skinned knees example, the other way that I like to look at next chapter businesses with so many women that I work with is that you're a bridge. You're the bridge between where someone is and where they want to be. And you can decide to offer your hand to help someone cross that bridge. And this is the crux. It's recognizing that the experience that you have is of value to another person.
Yes, totally.
That's the piece that we've really got to accept and to bring into our hearts to help us get the faith and get the impetus to actually then create the business that acts as that bridge.
It is, and that is a big shift. When it comes, it's sort of it's one of those shifts that sort of builds up, and then all of a sudden one day something's different. And I do recall, I did quite a few workshops and things trying to. I remembered myself as a confident person, but I knew right in that moment, and we're talking maybe 3-4 years ago, that the divorce is finalized. I've got this new life ahead of me, but I feel shattered and just not the old me. And I really knew that I'd lost a lot of my confidence. I did some workshops, and at one of those workshops, one of the things that was said was life rewards action. And it was Ben Harvey actually said life rewards action. And I thought, okay, well, I need to do something. I can't just sit around being unhappy about where I am. I need to do something and change something. So I thought, okay, what do I want? What do I actually want my life to look like? And I worked backwards from there. And then it became easier to do one thing to get me towards what is this thing that I'm going to do today going to get me towards what I want my life to look at? No, don't do it. Is it going to get me towards where I want my life to be, the picture I have of my life? Yes. Okay, move on, forward.
That is so powerful, and I love, I don't know if you heard yourself say this, I remembered myself as a confident person. So you reconnected to the woman that you were and took those parts, those values, that way that you saw yourself and brought it into the present time. That is so valuable. I think we can look back at our past, and actually there's a process that I use, and it's on my website as well. It's a program called Your Journey Board, where I ask people to look at their past, and within that past, you'll find the gold, you'll find the experiences that you can choose to bring with you into your next chapter. And that moment, you said that moment, that shift when you remembered yourself as a confident person, that's poetry. Love hearing that.
But it's so, I feel that that's true for every woman or every man. And it's amazing, actually, we're talking about women here today, but there are so many men who use the word broken when they talk about their divorce experience. But let's just stay with women. There are so many women. In fact, every woman that I speak to, when I ask them, you weren't always with this person. You had a life as a single person where you were happy before you met and married this person or got into this relationship with this person. Think about that. And every single woman that goes back and thinks about that, they sort of smile and go, yeah, I was this, I was that. And it just, I say to them, well, you were that. There's absolutely no reason why you can't be something like that again. You're not going to be the same person that you were when you were 20 years old, thank goodness, in my case. Thank goodness I'm not going back there again.
Amen to that.
You are you can get that whole happy self back again.
And so it's reconnecting. It's reconnecting to that core of you, the essential self that's in there. There's layers that have been laid down, the experiences that we've had, but she's still in there. So it's just that case
Yes, and she
of
deserves to
seeking
be
her.
happy again.
Yes, and I love that idea, and it's very much the philosophy that I utilize as well with myself and with my clients. Is that, well, what do we want to create? What do we
Yeah.
want it to look like? And that's why when you were saying before that you're identifying what you didn't want, because I've found that often women find it difficult to articulate what they do want because they've spent so much time, again, talking in overall broad brushstrokes here,
Mhm.
but we've spent so much time taking care of others and putting ourselves down the priority totem pole. It can actually be when you ask someone, what do you really love? What do you really want? And
Well,
there's a bit of
yeah,
silence, like,
yeah, exactly.
um,
Yeah, that is
yeah.
so true, and it sort of harks back to what I said earlier about allowing all those little drips and of other people's needs,
Mm.
and putting myself second, putting oneself second or third or fifth sometimes. That you're not the strong rock that you were before, and it does take some work to get back to that. But yeah, you do deserve it, and you can do it.
And you can do it, absolutely. Can I ask, because I'd like to ask some specific questions about the business and the business experience, but before I go there, another piece that I've found is very important is community and connection.
Mm,
Being connected with other like-minded women who are
yes.
doing similar things. Has that been an important part in your journey as well?
Yes, it has. And I made some mistakes with that along the way, actually. Um, but I did find people who were really inspirational to me. And a lot of those people had been through a divorce or separation themselves, but they were quite a few years ahead of me in that process. The ones that I ended up with really getting a lot of value from, they were quite a few years ahead of me in the process. So they were able to separate themselves from their initial, strong feelings of resentment or hurt or whatever it was, and see things with a little bit of hindsight, or as I've heard you say in the past, hindsight, which I love. But I think it's been really valuable to have those women around me who have been there before, and they're brutal sometimes. They have. There's one woman in particular, and I thank her for this. She just pulled me up. She said, "I don't want to be around you if you're going to constantly be negative about your situation." And she said, I actually don't enjoy my time with you when you're constantly harping on about what a pain in the butt this divorce is." And it was a, it was really, it was a little bit confronting because I'm thinking, well, it is a pain. And yet she's saying, well, yes, it is, but it's not the whole of you. And so that, having women around you like that who are honest, but loving is fantastic. I mentioned that I made a mistake. I very quickly after I separated, I very quickly gravitated towards one woman in particular who was also in the same situation as me, but she was probably the only person I knew at that point who was in the same situation. We were around about the same age, children around the same age, etc. I found myself getting sucked in to the neediness. In fact, she would probably say the same thing, to be honest, that we sort of became needy towards each other, and neither one of us was growing. So I do think you need to be careful when you look for support and community and empathy from other people, that you choose people who are growing and positive, and not people who are just going to be emotional vampires and leave you feeling worse than you were when you started.
That's a really good point because and I can certainly relate to that, different situations, but we were casting a shadow on each other. So, and we
Yes.
were sitting in each other's shadows,
Yes,
and
exactly.
and that's the
Yeah.
thing that held you back. I mean, we've often heard the expression that you are the sum of the five people that you spend the most time with.
Mm.
So, if you're not liking what's happening, then maybe you need to have a look at those connections that you are making. And sometimes a major change in life demands a change in the people that you're surrounded by. It
It
can be
does.
tough.
Yeah, it does. And divorce is one of those major changes. And
Mm.
one of the things that I found was that there were some people around me who, it was almost like they thought divorce might be contagious. And so I didn't lose those people as friends. But I certainly, they were probably second tier friends, acquaintances, better than acquaintances. But I certainly lost the time that I spent with those people. And I sort of looked at it later on and I thought, well, the women, um, they didn't want, it felt like they didn't want single women around their husbands. And it felt like to me that the husbands actually didn't want happy divorced women around their wives in case their wives decided that they could do it too. So you do, getting divorced. There is a little bit of an element, and I'm not the only person. That's a fairly common thing that happens to people.
Yeah, I've certainly, I have friends separated and divorced, and we've had some fairly candid conversations. My husband's, I'm his second wife, so I'm familiar with some of the ins and outs here for sure. But
Yeah.
and that that actually brings us around nicely to that concept of the ins and outs of actually moving through a separation, and as you say, different people are very it's unexpected, it's shell shocked, it's
Hmm.
like, what do I do, what are all the pieces that I've got to pull together? It can be really hard, and that was the experience that then birthed the business concept that you have today. So I understand very much the reasoning, or the motivation behind actually creating the business. But if you could talk to us a little bit about what was the experience like actually creating the business. You had the passion, you had the drive, you had the desire, you saw the need, you had the experience
Mm.
to share. But now we've actually got to create the business, and that part
Yes,
that part can be quite
it
daunting.
was a massive learning curve. It really was a huge learning curve. So, you're going to start a new business, you have to have a website. Everybody's saying you have to have a website, blah, blah, blah. That whole process in itself it's really daunting. There are so many different ways of doing things, and so I spent a lot of my time and energy and actually a reasonable amount of money in educating myself about all the different options. And then after about 2 years, I thought, well, yeah, how about we just do something now? So I procrastinated around about trying to learn too much before I started. Um, I think I came up with the split kit, which is a piece of software, which is a divorce organizer, and it's fabulous. I'm so proud of it. But it is now in its sort of third form, because the first way that I did it one way and I thought, oh no, that's not good enough. That doesn't really work properly. The second time I did it, I had it almost to completion, but we had a tragedy in our family, which just put everything on hold for quite a long time. But I was ready to launch the split kit at that point. And we said before, we were talking, offline, and I said that things happen when they need to happen.
Mm.
We had that sort of tragedy. My father was very tragically killed, and everything went on hold. So it was a good 6 to 8 months before I came back to looking at the split kit. And when I came back to it, it took a very short time for me to say, that's not how it should work. It needs to work like this. And it was quite a short time in development after that to come to what we've got now. So there was a lot of learning. There was a lot of procrastination. That is really something that I struggle with. And I'm a little bit of, well, I'm actually not a little bit, I'm a full-on perfectionist, and I'm really trying to get my head around and learn, and learn from other people who say rather have it out there and done than perfect. There's no good being perfect if it's still sitting on my desk. So I had to learn a lot about time management. I had to learn a lot about presentation, being confident in myself again, and then I had to learn the technical aspects. Something that I always knew from being in IT, and it's still very, very true, and probably even more so today, is that there's actually no point on trying to be an expert on the technical issues, because if it's out there for me to learn, then somebody's already working on something, some new concept. So you've just, at some point in time, you've just got to bite the bullet and go with the best that you've got.
Absolutely, and I love the what you were saying before. But let me just go back to my wee notes here. Life rewards action.
Yes, it
and
does.
and it's natural for us to want to have whatever it is that we're putting out in the world. It's natural for us to want to get it to the best version that we can. But
Well,
it
if it's
is,
got your name on it,
yes.
if it's got my name on it, it is going to be the best that it can be. I cannot let people down.
No, and I understand that philosophy. I guess the way that I soften it is the concept of horizons. So horizon one of your business, much like the horizon one of the
Mhm.
split kit, it needs to go out there, because until you can actually release something, you can't get the feedback that allows you to
Yes,
see where the changes are needed. And
yes,
that procrastination, that, wanting, and I'm not necessarily saying that this was your scenario, but it's just something I see often, is that the wanting approval, the wanting it to, for people to think that it's perfect and it's fabulous. Of course we want that, but you can't guarantee that perfection without getting the feedback and making the changes. So I like to
yeah,
think of horizon one, and then you have some experience, you see what's working or what isn't, then you move into horizon two, and then you move into
yes.
horizon three, and there's different demands and different needs on both you as a business owner and what you are creating and delivering at those different horizons.
Yeah, I think
And
that's really good advice actually, and in meeting those horizons, I think coming to, just being aware that it is not going to be perfect for everybody all of the time. There is going to be criticism. There will be things that haven't been done properly, but just go with it. Just start. Just do something.
absolutely. That's what we need to do. And for anyone who's listening, really let that land. I've spoken to so many women, wonderful, talented, experienced women with so much to share, who hold themselves back for those two reasons. Number one, I'm not sure that I'm good enough, that, it's the
Mhm.
self-worth side of things, which is such a big part of, I'm passionate about self-worth as a whole issue. And then the other side, it's got to be perfect. Just stop procrastinating, darling, get it out there.
Yeah,
And
I
then and
couldn't
then
agree more.
and
And the people around me will be cheering. The people,
I can hear them.
yay, finally.
Well, let's touch just briefly, with the time that we have left, about how the split kit actually helps people who are faced with separation, how it can help them save time and money and anguish and confusion and all of those things. How does it simplify things for people?
Okay, so this is something I absolutely love to talk about, of course, but
Yay.
there's the traditional way. Oh, I've separated. Oh, you better get a lawyer. Well, the first thing I'll need to say is that I'm not against family lawyers at all. I think, the vast majority of them are quite brilliant at what they do, and you will get very good value from their services. However, they're not the first person that you need. The first things that you need to do when you separate is really be kind to yourself, slow things down, look after yourself. And the two areas that you really, from my point of view, and from just speaking to so many people over the last 7 years, there are two areas that we really need to focus on. One is getting yourself and your emotions under control and processed to a point where you can communicate effectively with your ex-partner, because there are things that you need to communicate about: children, money, and how you're going to dissolve a long-standing relationship. So it's really important to work on yourself and to work on those communication skills so you can get to a point of negotiation. When you're able to negotiate, you can't make a good decision if you haven't got the information. And so you then start looking at finance assets, liabilities, and arrangements around your children. You do not need a lawyer to collect that information for you. They need it. They absolutely, or a finance advisor, any expert that you're going to approach, they need that information. They can't give you advice that's specific to your circumstances unless they know exactly what those circumstances are. So you can sit in front of them and pay them their hourly rate to collect all that information, or you could collate it all yourself in one form or another. What I've done with the split kit is I've put it into a piece of software that asks a series of questions for every single thing that they need to know. And you just bang in the information. It asks you the next question. You put it in, and you're paying the cost of 1 hour with a family lawyer, less than 1 hour with a family lawyer, and you sit there and you do it in your own time. And then once you've collated all the information, you can print out a summary of separation, which gives any advisor a complete snapshot of your situation, and they then can advise you on your specifically to your circumstances. So effectively with the split kit, you're paying a professional advisor, be it a finance advisor or a lawyer, for their professional opinion and not for doing your basic admin.
That makes so much sense.
Yes, it does. I think it really does, because I mean, it came about because I looked at my disbursement bill after after the whole separation was finished and the divorce was finalised. I looked at the disbursement bill. That's basically the photocopying, the filing, the postage, the telephone calls. It was enormous. It could have supported a small country. And my ex-husband had the same thing, because we had a lawyer each who had to communicate. We couldn't communicate with each other. Now we have to give the finance information to our lawyer, who then sends it to the other lawyer. They have to copy it, file it, respond to it, blah, blah, blah. It was silly. It was really, really silly to approach it that way. One of the moves in family law at the moment is it's called collaborative practice. And people are approaching a finance advisor or a divorce coach as the initial person, and it's a neutral person who sits between the partners, and it's one point of collection, and they collect and they collate all that information for you, and they can set out different scenarios to help you to come to some sort of an arrangement and agreement. If that's not possible, then you go into a mediated situation, and from there you reach a legal agreement, and that's when you call in lawyers. There's a company in Australia at the moment called Divorce Partners who approach divorce in that way, and I cannot say how in favour I am of that approach, but they've said to me just this morning that they need to go through the process of collating all this information as well. So if a client comes to them with a split kit, they will pay for the split kit, because it just takes all of that time and office administrative work out of that process for them. So that's in essence, it saves people time and money by doing the admin that they can do themselves at their own pace at any hour of the day or night when they feel up to doing it.
Oh, I'm fortunate at this point in my life. I don't have a need for the split kit, but oh my goodness,
Well,
can I see?
Very fortunately, at this point in your life, you don't need it.
But I can absolutely see the value in that, the logic in that, the saving of the time, the pressure, the whole idea that if things are not necessarily being processed logically when you're in such a highly emotive
No,
state.
they're not.
So
No, they're not.
that advice about looking at the self and the emotions so that you can get to a point where you can communicate effectively. I know on your website there's lots of there's resources, there's stories, there's backgrounds in that where you can find you're not alone, and perhaps some resources there will help you look at the emotional side, and then the next step, get a split kit. It just makes absolute sense. And the fact, and again it brings us full circle, because this has been created from empathy, from understanding, from being at the coalface, from walking through the fire, through coming out the other side, and then recognizing what you could share as a result of that would help others. And that to me is the absolute essence of a next chapter business.
Well, that is exactly what happened. And I looking at that disbursement bill, it was ridiculous. It is a ridiculous waste of money that could have gone into anything else in my life or my children's life, rather than paying someone for doing photocopying. And I looked at that and I thought there has to be a better way. And I know what that better way it is. I can visualize it. I can see how it would work. How am I going to do it? And it's taken a good 4 years to get to where I am now, but I can't wait to get it out there and save people thousands of dollars and heaps of hours so they can get back to doing things that make them happier.
And I'm so delighted that we've had this conversation, and I'm hoping that anyone who's listening to the podcast today, right now, even if this is not something that you need right now, I absolutely guarantee there is somebody in your mind, in your experience, in your circle that could benefit from having access to this. So please share the podcast so people can get this information that's so important to them.
Yeah, of course, I'd appreciate that too. Thank you.
Absolutely. And we'll make sure all the details are on the webpage as well so that people can find you. But can you just give us the best contact details for you, for those who are listening, driving their car, whatever the case may be, of where they can find you online, Christine?
The best place to come is to the website, which is divorceresource.com.au. And from there, you can find links to our webpage, to our Facebook page, to Twitter. We've got a couple of videos on YouTube that really explain what we do and how the split kit works. But the best place to come to is the divorceresource.com.au website.
Perfect, and I'll make sure I pop that hot link onto the page as well. And
Super.
I do believe, as we were talking before, that you have a gift that people will be able to
Yes, I
download
do.
from the
Yeah.
page. Can
Yeah.
you talk to us about what's involved in the book?
Sure, I'd love to. So people kept telling me, you should write a book, and so I did. And I would like to offer that to your listeners as a free ebook download.
Beautiful.
And there will be, I'm sure you'll have directions on your site as to how that happens.
Absolutely.
But in that book, it's called The First Steps Through Separation and Divorce, and that is exactly what it addresses. It addresses, the very first things that you should do in those first days, weeks, and months. And it takes you through, in quite a lot of detail, actually, the family law court process. So you can see that if you choose to go that litigated court method, this is how it's going to go for you. And you could use that as a basis for being a litigant in person, so representing yourself, if you needed to. And some people do. Some people do need to go through that family court situation. It also addresses in quite a lot of depth the issue of family violence, and I really feel for those listeners who might be out there who are experiencing that. That is just a very confronting and difficult situation, but it does deal with family violence and how to perhaps make your environment safer, prepare for leaving, and where you can go for help. There's a lot of list of resources in the back. It basically, the book answers all the questions that I had in the first month or two, and a lot that I've researched since then that other people have told me, they had in their situation. And I'd be very happy for all of your listeners to have that downloaded from your site.
Fantastic. Then I'll make sure that link and there'll be a visual of the cover of the book as well is there, so it's nice and easy to download. I mean, these conversations and that sort of information that you've collated together, they're not always the most comfortable of conversations to have, but they're essential, they're valuable, they're important. So thank you on behalf of anyone who's listening for putting that together for us as well.
It's been my pleasure.
Oh, this has just been a delightful conversation. I love how we've weaved in so many different directions. We've touched on old chapters, new chapters, on self-worth, on confidence, on action and how that creates confidence in us, on taking an idea and seeing that our own experiences can absolutely be of value to another person. And importantly, one of the most important things that you've shared with us is that recognition that things happen in the timing in which they are to happen. So no beating ourselves up if our idea that we've been nestling in our heart for a while has taken a wee while to bring out into the world. Once it's there, then we can craft it, we can get that feedback, we can expand it, and I dare say have that feeling of fulfillment that you'd be experiencing now because you've created what you were here to create.
It is totally exciting right now to see all this work and to see all the time and effort and energy that's gone into it actually here as a real thing. It's available to people, and I know it's going to be helpful. It's actually really exciting, well worth it.
I can hear it. I can hear it in your voice. So congratulations. I am hugely, hugely excited for you and for everyone whose lives you are going to change because you had the courage to step up and get started in your next chapter. So well done, my darling.
Thank you very much, Angela.
And everyone listening, hopefully you are as inspired as I am by this conversation. You can really hear what is possible when you decide, God damn it, I'm going to back myself. What I have is of value. That concept of being the bridge, that's what you can be. That bridge for another person, between where they are and where they want to be. Never, never lose sight of the value of your experiences because there's another person out there who only needs to hear what you've got to share. So thank you again for tuning into the Next Chapter podcast. I'm Angela Raspis, wishing you a lovely day, and we'll be connecting again really soon. Take care. Thanks for listening to the Your Next Chapter podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please let me know. Pop over to angelaraspis.com to subscribe to the show and leave a review. And whilst you're there, you can also enjoy valuable free resources, including show notes and downloads, along with the Next Chapter community, where you can connect with other wholehearted women on the same journey as you. We'd love to welcome and support you as your next chapter unfolds. See you next time.